everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the new format of the Libertarian Party UK. The new name of the podcast is Give Freedom a Chance. I'm your host, Luca Bocci. I've been a journalist for more than 35 years. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party, and I will guide you through this new format, this new experience that will hopefully bring something to the conversation and allow each and every one of us to go beyond what is offered by the legacy media and get out a little bit of the whole trite conversations that we hear so long. So thank you all for joining us on this new experience and the new stuff. And for the first episode, we have a couple of really great guests that we were overjoyed to have on our debut, on our pilot episode of this podcast. And our intention is to keep it going. And so not all the time we will have massive guests as we have now, but our idea is to keep the conversation going so that everyone can join in, and we will be happy to receive your questions and answer your questions so you can have them on the chat. And as always, first episode, we will talk about one of the hot topics of the day, the impact of AI, artificial intelligence, more precisely large language models and generative AI. You can see there is a massive hype on the subject. There is a lot of disinformation as well. So everybody is now attaching the whole AI thing to whatever. So your fridge is AI, your dishwasher is AI, and anything else. Your car is so great because it's got AI. It's so powerful. It's much better than the old one. Well, some of the promises are a bit off. Others are actually real. But in reality, the whole point is, will it be a boon for productivity, sort of a quantum leap, just as it was the introduction of computers many years ago? Or will it be a danger for our personal freedoms, which have been relentlessly under assault for the past, 30, 40 years? So again, we will have a proponent of each position. So let's say someone who is more comfortable, actually enthusiastic about the possibilities of AI, and another person that is looking at things slightly from a different point of view and saying, well, hold on, let's not put the horse, put the cart before the horses, and try to say, let's be a bit calmer. So I already talked too much, so let me introduce the rest of the gang, which I have here already logged in, and let them turn on the microphones, because otherwise it would be really, really bad. So first of all, our generous host, the leader of the Libertarian Party UK, Alex Zychowski. Hi, Alex.
Good evening, Luca. Good evening, Patrick. Good evening, Sandy.
Okay, you've gone ahead. You're trying to steal my job already. My God, come on. All in all, a person that should probably not need a lot of introduction, because he is literally, I've used it in the intro and everything, world-renowned architect. Actually, Patrik Schumacher is already, I think he already won a trophy this year. What is that? European Architect of the Year. All in all, you probably know some of his work, and he is the head of the Zychowski architect company in London, and it's a great honor to have you here, Patrik.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Oh, all right, that's great. Again, so just to make things clear, Patrik Schumacher is someone that has had the chance to work with AI models and with AI-linked tools, and has seen firsthand exactly how powerful they can be, not just in terms of data crunching, number crunching and stuff, but in terms of actually facilitating the whole creative process, something that, I come from the media. I've been a journalist for most of my life, so I'm a little bit more skeptical from that point of view. But then again, Sandy Starr instead is the deputy director of actually a charity that is working on pretty much, what is that, learning issues and stuff. Sandy, just clarify a little bit.
Yeah, my charity. Pleasure to be here. The charity I work for, the Progress Educational Trust, is a charity that works in the fields of fertility, genomics, and embryo and stem cell research, and seeks to improve both public and professional understanding of those fields.
So yeah, I've seen actually that the bulletin that you provide is actually very informational on these topics, because obviously these topics are exceedingly technical. And sometimes when my editor comes to me and says, well, why don't you write an article on, I don't know, genomics and stuff, I just look very terrified and say, oh my God, this is a minefield. And your work has been actually great. All in all, you might know Sandy from the Battle for Ideas. And the whole point is that you published recently a pamphlet that is called AI Separating Man from Machine, if I remember correctly. That's the one. Actually very interesting as well. In terms of saying, hold on, let's not get over ourselves. It's, probably there are a lot of dangers to that. So you will be the AI skeptical. So Alex will be providing the Libertarian Party view. I will try to play devil's advocate and in general try to be as entertaining as I can without making a fool of myself. And so then again, as always, this is a broadcast of the Libertarian Party. I think it would be good manners in terms of saying, giving Alex the chance of saying, okay, what is the party position in terms of investing in AI, the role of AI in public services and stuff? So all in all, what is the party view on that? Is it a danger? Is it an opportunity? Should we be careful? Again, to you. The floor is yours, as they say.
Thank you, Luca. When we first advertised the podcast yesterday, one of the first comments on social media to the graphic AI a threat or a game changer, someone wrote one word response, both. And that's the way that the Libertarian Party is approaching artificial intelligence. As long as we are able to distinguish its use between private organizations, private businesses, and the state, these are two very, very different uses of the technology, then we can ensure that it does become absolutely a game changer, increases productivity, and even increases individual liberty. There are some ways that we can go about doing that with artificial intelligence. So we recently published our digital freedoms policy. It will be on the websites shortly, so please do have a look. And we are concerned, we are excited and concerned with the technocratic authoritarianism that artificial intelligence could enable. So if we look at Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, the way they've been going recently with facial recognition surveillance, the Online Safety Act, proposals for digital ID, suggests that they are looking to use technology as a source of control to limit our freedoms. So we want to distinguish between use of AI by private businesses, such as Patrik's, and by the state, which is another matter altogether. So we are willing to confront the political implications of artificial intelligence before it becomes a fait accompli. So our view essentially is private businesses should be permitted to use it as they wish. There are obviously concerns with property rights, copyright, and so on that I'm sure we'll go into this evening. But the main concern that we have is the potential acting in concert with facial recognition, for example, or authoritarian legislation. There needs to be a way to align artificial intelligence with the principles of individual liberty. And one thing I noticed reading Patrik and Sandy, your publications, is while you perhaps differ on the threat that AI might propose, you both seem to be of the view that it remains human responsibility to train and to steer artificial intelligence. I understand that's the point on which you both agree.
So far, yes, yeah. And
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Patrik. This is kind of the
absolutely at this point. Of course, I mean, we're training them, we're building them. We actually not only end users in our firm. We have a whole AI research team and development team where we train up models. Actually, a new model for each project, and the productivity boost been great. And so in this domain, there is no risk and no danger. I mean, what on the speculative level one could think of in the future, of course, you have also unsupervised learning, and you have other mechanisms which give more degrees of freedom and more self-organized power to these models, machines. But in the end, as long as they're not embodied in robotics and robots who have their own, let's say, ways of not necessarily immediately reproducing, but rewarding themselves and accessing power sources and living in a sense semi-independently, of course set up for purposes. There we're crossing another level, but much of this we're quite far away from that. But I do see, in terms of the threats, I do see, of course, yes, the surveillance state. I see also military escalation. But for me, also one of the biggest threats is not from AI itself, but from the government, from the states, is to try to regulate and curb this, let's say, freedoms we could of developing that and pushing that, because I think we're quite far away from any of these speculative dangers talking about in terms of AI system, particularly embodied robotic system, becoming kind of self-governant and develop their own purposes or strategies and stratagems of survival. So we're far away from that. For so far, I would say permissionless innovation must be, I think, a major principle at this point, and not allowing the government to curb and constrain that flourish of innovation, which is amazing at this point.
Yeah. Okay, Sandy. So what's your point in saying? Because as I said, in this case, I will go against the interest of my profession and stuff, because I think that most of the confusion is due to the fact that generalist media. So if you're not really an expert on the subject, well, you tend to just go a bit overboard in sensationalism and stuff and saying, oh my God, AI just rebelled. Now it's just trying to kill people. Because I've read that a few days ago. He's trying to kill people because he wants to survive. And again, you know, people tend to do 1 + 1. They think of Terminator and stuff. They think of Skynet. And so in terms of that, saying, okay, let's keep our feet firmly planted to the ground. So, Sandy, what is actually the correct position? Well, regulate, don't regulate, put safeguards. Again, what's your take?
I think paradoxically, the most sort of sensational doomsaying in relation to AI does help to promote and oversell it. And you will see, you know, big AI companies having signed up to catastrophic type statements saying we must ward off this terrible threat from AI. And it's a way of making themselves sound very important. It's a way of creating a sort of industry of AI whisperers who can go around and reassure one another. And I think the problems that stem from today's generative AI are probably rather more mundane, and it's rather convenient to have apocalyptic scenarios distracting from more mundane problems. A difficulty I've always had is that if the gap between human capabilities and machine capabilities seems to be closing, there's generally an assumption that human capacities are static and that the technology is rising to meet us. But I think there are two other ways of interpreting the situation. One is that the technology isn't actually all that it's made out to be, and we are lowering ourselves, actually. We are behaving in more machine-like ways, and that's why we think the machines are similar to us, because we're not being as good as we could be. Or a more positive interpretation is that the AI is indeed accomplishing remarkable things, and therefore the onus is on us as humans to accomplish even more remarkable things in order to rise to the challenge. One difficulty I have with the way humans and AI work together, there's a metaphor that is sometimes used in the literature, which is that of the centaur. And the idea of the centaur is meant to be that between you, a human and a machine are doing something that neither of you could achieve. So that the machine is this powerful horse and we are on top of it and we're doing great things. But there is the reverse situation, what is sometimes called the reverse centaur, the poor schmuck wandering around with a horse's head where his own head should be. And these are the poor people who have to tidy up after shortcuts have been taken with AI, either with vibe coding or some other corner has been cut, some efficiency has been made by using AI, and then a human has to come along and tidy up the mess. And it's usually it's usually drudge work, and you don't always end up with the best result from it. So yes, AI is fantastic and it has many advantages. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't get bored, but it can create errors that humans then have to trudge through and try to find and may not always succeed in finding.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of hallucinations, AI hallucinations and stuff. I think the story, I don't know if it's actually grounded in reality or not, but it's been making the rounds a little bit and saying there was a US bank that decided that considering the customer service was done with an AI chatbot, and it was so great and stuff, so might as well fire everybody that was in customer service. Then what happened? The complaints started multiplying because obviously the chatbot was only giving a certain level of answers, but the whole point is that chatbots and large language models in any way are being programmed not just with a political bias, as many people say, and especially the earlier iterations of ChatGPT that were particularly bad on that. I don't know if you remember Gemini, the AI from Google, that a while ago was making, when they were asking them, create an image of a German soldier from World War II, and actually they were all Africans and stuff, and because it was going haywire because it had been programmed badly. But the point is that it's always trying to give answers, because the goal is to give 100% satisfaction in the quickest time possible. So you go there, you ask anything, and if the model doesn't have the data, it just makes up something. So what happened is that the customer service, the bank, was forced to hire back everybody that they fired because they needed to sift through all the answers they had given, and yet some of the answers were completely wrong, but you don't know which answer was wrong. So that's also a danger of going too fast, too far.
That's an example. That is indeed a good example you've just mentioned. But it's not just a matter of the AI being programmed badly. AI isn't really programmed as such. It is trained. It will exhibit certain biases, and it will always exhibit certain biases. And no such thing as a perfect, perfectly neutral, perfectly impartial sort of generative AI that all of us would agree with. It is going to align one way or another, whether we want it to or not. The hallucinations, it's true that those can arise because the so-called hallucinations, I don't like the term very much actually, but it's true that those will arise because the AI inevitably is trying to present you with what is calculated to be plausible rather than what is true, because truth is something humans determine. But also because of the very way it works, you will never completely eliminate this phenomenon that has been called hallucination. That's the price you pay for having something very general purpose, very flexible, very powerful. It will occasionally do crazy things.
So yeah, the whole point is saying, Patrik, I was just thinking in terms of saying, some people say that considering that large language models, because right now even generative AI is pretty much an LLM applied to graphic rather than language. But I think that pretty much the models are quite similar. They say they produce a certain result because they start from certain data that actually is used to train that. So if you use, I don't know, I don't want to just incur in libel and stuff like that. Let's say a biased media source, Guardian comes to mind, but it could very well be the Telegraph or whatever. If you just feed the algorithm only stuff that comes from certain political bias, of course the answer is going to be biased, because garbage in, garbage out, as programmers used to say.
There's been a lot of complaints from the left about biases, but in fact, turns out that Wikipedia is in the end one of the most prominent source for most large language model information processing. It's a huge input in terms of weight. And there we do actually I find a lot of biases in Wikipedia in terms of more of a left-leaning bias, in fact. And that comes definitely through in some of the results. And then we also recently been hearing about the way Wikipedia got in recent years quite compromised with the kind of very narrow sets of sources feeding and being allowed to be referenced into Wikipedia, which again are, let's say, the standard corporate and, let's say, state-owned media sources and major sources like New York Times, etc., which again kind of reinforces a kind of left-leaning approach. And then we also have a lot of paid workforces editing and pushing agendas. So there's problems, of course. And I mean, but this has been noted, and I think now you can kind of work against that. That is an ongoing and ever ongoing kind of issue and problem. But still, I mean, even knowing that Wikipedia, I'm using it directly as well, or I mean, it's still an enormous amount of forward leap. Now that you also have the sources always kind of listed in, and it's always very up to date in terms of ChatGPT. And I mean, the amount of the empowerment for doing research and drilling deep into any topic, and it's just the experience is kind of way more powerful than Google used to be. And I remember when Google came on the scene, and before that we had Netscape. It was a huge game changer. I mean, suddenly the internet was something to really use, and before it was kind of highly frustrating to find something. And I think there's a quantum leap now with the large language models. And I think equally what is and you know, the sophistication and ordering of the results and the length of the results and the input staggering. But on the kind of image world, I mean, it's also been quite amazing, the precision and the plausibility of these results. And they're innovative, they're new, they're fresh, they have novelty qualities. And you can really that's not only a productivity boost, but a creativity boost, because you can have you can mix styles, you can have architectural figures or own, let's say, oeuvre being referenced and prompt, and then kind of mix it in with other references, maybe from landscape formations, from organic nature, or from other architects, from technical systems, and you can mix them and play with them, and then have, you know, also particularly subsidiary models, and you can calibrate by what percentage is a global model driving the results, and to what extent is the particular model driving the result. And I find it stunning. And again, there, of course, you in the end you're constrained with what has been on the internet with under certain prompt labels, and you cannot get away from that. But you can say that's a constraint. But I mean, fair enough. But it's just still has a lot of novelty. What you don't, and so it's just pretty amazing. And though I have to say one more thing, which when you work on papers, I'm writing them myself, by the way. I'm using sometimes ChatGPT to do abstracts. So if I'm querying my own work and ask for summaries of my works, or things I know very well, there you realize that as an expert in certain topics, it is not quite there. It is not. You can't be substituted, and I can't write an article, and particularly if you're onto something original where there's very few references, or you're really breaking new ground. Of course, there you can't use it, but maybe that's good as well. But at the same time, so there are these kind of limitations. But but they're limitations, yes. But it is the unlimited realm of possibility compared to where we were just a few, 2-3 years ago, and getting ever more better. And it's the fastest growing sets of apps the world has ever seen. Before that, it was crypto. Anyway, it's exciting times. I'm just thrilled.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of, this is something that does not just apply to architecture and anything. I've heard experts from all walks of life that they say, well, if you are very knowledgeable about a certain subject, you will realize that sometimes it's just hot air, and it's some stuff that looks like it could be plausible, but actually it's not.
But I tell you, I had exactly the same experience when journalism and also well-accredited serious journalism talks about topics which I know very well, about us, or about people we know extremely well. They're full of mistakes, full of misleading leads. So you better don't want to. It's actually quite sobering experience, because you need to believe, you need to take it up and run with what you've fed by the media, but also you're fed by these models. You have nothing else to go by. But I had the same experience as you have now when I, research something I already know very well. With the media, it was every single time.
Even if, as I said, I've been a journalist since 1990, and so I've come across all sorts of revolution, because the first newsroom I stepped foot in back in 1990, it had one computer and the editor had it, and all of us, they were using typewriters. So I've gone through the desktop publishing revolution and stuff, and then the online world, video, streaming, and so on. So I've seen it all. And then I was in charge of an OTT service, as I say, from a typewriter to an OTT service with millions of subscribers. So I've seen it all. And most of the times I have no problems admitting that most of the mistakes that you see online is just because there is not enough time, and there is not enough will, and there is not enough humility. Sometimes when you receive a task and say, well, I want to write something about, genomics, rather than saying, sure, boss, I can do it, you might as well say, well, that's not exactly something I'm comfortable with. Might as well go and interview someone who knows what he's talking about. But then again, but I need it now, which is why. So again, Sandy, I was just thinking in terms of saying, this is one of the risks. But in terms of saying, what is the most actual risk that you see nowadays? Notwithstanding the anything that the government may come up with let's be honest, some of the so-called the deep state, anything that they have, they will use it to just take away our freedom. And this is no conspiracy theory, because, as they said, conspiracy theory is something that will be proven right in 9 months' time. This is what is happening nowadays. So, which is the big, well, not all of them, but some people that go there, flat Earth, or we haven't been to the moon. Okay, these are bonkers people. So let's leave them aside. But most of the conspiracy theories nowadays are not the super crazy ones. Sometimes they have a tendency to do it. So, Sandy, what is the big risk? There's something that not everyone is very aware of, but they should be on the lookout.
Well, I don't think AI is leaving the web in a very good state. There was a conspiracy theory going around for the last few years called dead internet theory, which held that more than half the content of the web was made either by or for non-humans, by bots. And it was a pretty bonkers conspiracy theory. Ironically, AI has made it true. More than half of the content on the web now probably is AI slop. And it has led the web to be less useful than it was. Those glory days when Google came in and when it launched its search tool that uses the PageRank algorithm, which is a very interesting algorithm that relates interestingly to where AI came from. Those days are over. Google, it's been documented by the journalist Cory Doctorow that it deliberately degraded its product in around 2019 so that it could keep people on its site longer to look at ads so it could make rather more money. And the web as a whole is getting lower in quality. One of the dangers is that, well, we become more conformist if we resort to AI lazily, if we treat it as the sort of the end rather than the beginning of our process of inquiry. And if we encourage younger generations to treat it that way, rather than making the effort to find things out for themselves. But it's also possible that if people are taking shortcuts with AI and it is hallucinating, those things can be sort of reified into supposed facts that it's very hard to then unpick and dig out. So there's a general danger of the web being increasingly full of useless slop. But then there are also particular dangers when shortcuts are taken in particular professions. We know that AI is being used for note-taking in medical appointments. We know that there are the many instances in the USA of the police using AI to write their reports and actually switching off the safeguards that the people who make that particular software put in to ensure that a human does check things. So the concern is that hallucinations will end up baked into your medical record, into your police record. into the sort of case history in court, legal history. There are many opportunities here for truth to be distorted or warped while we're not paying due attention to it. And then finally, I think one of the biggest dangers is AI does not realize its full potential. So we've been talking a lot about, large language models, which are the dominant approach, or one of the dominant approaches to AI. There's a specific type of large language model, which architecture called transformer architecture, which was developed 8 years ago and which underpins everything. That's what the T in ChatGPT stands for. It's transformer. And one of the people who devised it and actually coined the term transformer, Leon Jones, said at a conference just last month, he is absolutely sick of transformers. He thinks attention has gone so narrowly on transformers, we are missing out on all the other things AI might do. So we might squander AI's potential if we're not careful.
Yeah, I've seen that actually. The kind of saying that, okay, I'm media world and everything. In the media world and stuff, they say I'm still a Luddite regarding to ChatGPT. So I pretty much refuse to use any kind of AI in my job, just because my job usually is going around and looking at kind of news that not many people are covering and stuff, and trying to go to the original sources so that I can get a different feel. Because when you are a freelancer like I am, after many years in the profession, I know that if you keep pushing the same story, or if you keep trying to follow trends, you're never original, and you are very replaceable. Because the job that I can do going on in 20 websites all across the world and trying to find an interesting story, ChatGPT can do it in a microsecond, and it can, if it gets the right prompt, can write something the way I do. So if I don't provide original content, I'm doomed. But this is a very specific thing. But in terms of saying, I think in the medical field, there is big potential, because it's the approach that they have. It's kind of like a brute force approach. So I will just do every single possible combination in terms of chemical components and stuff. And so I will try active, things that can work on anything. And this is something that it would be completely unfeasible if you had, someone that goes there in a lab and it tries to test them, everything. So this is the kind of big thing that is happening, and saying, or maybe in astronomy and stuff, you have all sorts of signals that are coming from, telescopes from all 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you can unleash AI into this field and say, oh, well, hold on, 30 years ago, you might have found the planet, because now it's looking at all the data. So in reality, it is very powerful, and it has potential for achieving massive things. But at the same time, it has to be treated with the kind of care that we had probably for computers at the beginning. Because I remember, my first computer was back in 1982. It was a Commodore 64, and it's the best Christmas present that I ever got in my life, because my parents surprised me completely, and with the box, and I was literally jumping up and down. I was 10 years old. So it was great. But at that time, we thought computers could do everything. But then again, people were watching it with suspicion. I don't think right now people look at AI with the kind of thing that I think it's the society is split in two. So what is your take, Alex, in terms of say, is there more AI fear, or more, because you have the pulse of the nation in terms of saying, so, or more AI enthusiasm? Because, if you listen to advertisers, your next fridge, if it's got AI in it, it's going to be super great and definitely worth the 2,000 quid that they were asked for it. So what is your take right now, Alex?
Well, as I suggested, ironically, I think the fear and the enthusiasm, there are in some ways one. So saying that AI is going to be so devastating or bring about such a disastrous outcome is a way of making it seem extremely important, and is very good for box office. Now, the idea that computers can do everything, the irony is that computers as we know them, computer science, was born precisely out of realizing that computers can't do everything. So before 1936, a computer was a name for a person. It was a job that a person did, a very boring, rote job. And it was Alonzo Church and Alan Turing who proved in 1936, 1937, that there are certain things that those people were doing, those human computers, that can be automated. And you can envisage this in a sort of ideal abstract model of what those computers were doing, which is what's called a Turing machine. However, Turing, the reason he alighted on this is because he was trying to answer a very deep and very abstract philosophical question at the time about what could and could not be done in mathematics, what could and could not be automated or achieved by algorithms. And what he established conclusively is that there is a difference between a computer and a mathematician. A computer can be automated and a mathematician can't. And that result has been sort of refined in the decades since and has, evolved into other key questions of computer science. But the fact is that mathematicians are human, despite rumors to the contrary. So if a computer can't do everything that a mathematician does, that in and of itself suggests that a computer can't do everything that a human being does.
Yeah. So, Patrik, what is your take? Is more an enthusiasm thing, or there is a lot of skepticism, especially in your profession, in the circles that you go around?
I think in my milieu, in my immediate, with the colleagues and the schools where I'm teaching, it is more enthusiastic than anything. And I know that in other pockets of the discipline, there will be more skepticism, in particular in areas of the discipline where there isn't actually much scope for innovation, where all of these creative boosting kind of opportunities have no cachet and no chance to get realized, for instance, in a place like the UK. And that's kind of dampening the enthusiasm. And the other thing I want to refer to, what I feel, there's sometimes worry about employment draining away from certain professions, and I have very little time for that idea. My experience actually over the years is that we had previous number of productivity boosts through the computational revolution and in our profession, CAD, BIM, and computational design algorithms, and we have kind of just not seen unemployment. We have just seen that all of these additional productivity gains went into the product itself to have a better decisions, have more clarity and visualization power, and no more anticipation. And it also didn't drain away fees. And and similarly, I would say that it just goes into a better and more high quality work, and that if there's some reallocation of work, I think, of course, if we have an economy which we would have more degrees of freedom and we had more less constrained and more free contracting, that would be much easier to assuage these worries. We could absorb all these, let's say, displaced workers into new ventures if we had entrepreneurial freedoms. But so far, anyway, it hasn't happened. There's a lot of worry and thinking that this is inevitably leaving huge parts of the population unemployed. I don't see those problems.
So yeah, this is actually the thing that was interesting me, because I've been even if I covered all sorts of topics and stuff. Originally, I have a master's in international politics and stuff, so I tend to worry more about the political side and everything. And so, Alex, I was thinking in terms of saying, right now, I don't seem to see, at least in the UK, I don't seem to notice a lot of discussion on that, because I see a lot of political parties and political operatives, they use it as a sort of Wunderwaffe, in terms of going back to the old days and saying, AI will solve everything, data centers will bring lots of jobs, it's going to be amazing. We just need to pour some tens of billions, hundreds of billions into this new thing. God only knows where they're going to take the money from, considering the state of the budget and the debt. But taxes aside, so what is the political world looking at AI in the right way, or as always they are the ones having the hallucinations and stuff? Because sometimes they seem to be slightly detached from reality. This is just me from the outside.
Well, yes, I mean, there's certainly no lack of hallucinations, particularly on the left. You mentioned, pouring billions into AI. I agree with Patrik. The state can simply remove itself. Regulations are a libertarian's worst enemy. And if we look at the capability increases in AI, the potential for growth generated by AI itself, it makes itself a self-funding model, essentially. There has been talk of a stock market bubble about to crash with AI. I'm skeptical of that personally. I think we're already seeing the rewards coming in, and what we don't need is the state getting involved in regulating AI in terms of what it can do for productivity. It's perfectly capable on its own. I found it interesting. We've spoken this evening about not just the increase in productivity but also creativity. Sandy, you spoke about computers, and Patrik, you were talking about genuine creativeness from artificial intelligence. This really is a game changer here, when we have people referring to machine created images as if they were novel ideas. So the state doesn't need to fund this. We're going to see huge increases in productivity as a result of increasing capability. The bandwidth with which these models, the amount of data they have access to, Luca, you mentioned, astronomy, the finding of exoplanets, so on and so forth. This is all now down to AI. But I think the crux of the issue that we've all mentioned this evening is when we combine that capability, an artificial intelligence, while it may not have the insight perhaps that a human might have, the raw numbers it can crunch and the number of sources that it can access and evaluate in an instant makes it a highly capable machine. But if we combine that capability with the instances of fallibility, so the hallucinations, then I think we do need to temper the enthusiasm with a little bit of caution. So we've got Labour already talking about delegating decisions on benefits to artificial intelligence.
Oh, dear God.
Now, as libertarians, cut the benefits, absolutely. But if you provide an artificial intelligence with the goal of, right, let's streamline this budget, let's make some cuts here as appropriate, that's certainly something the Libertarian Party would be in favour of. But we need to make sure that artificial intelligence is aligned or prevented from adopting sub-goals. So if you tell an AI, let's cut this or let's make this more efficient, the first thing it will likely say is, okay, give me more data. I want to know where these people live, what they're spending their money on, their medical records. And if you're using an artificial intelligence as an agent of the state, there will instantaneously be more demands for information on the individual. Combine that with hallucinations, and we're in a very dangerous place if we outsource decisions on policing, for example, or healthcare to AI. We've seen it already with facial recognition algorithms. The Met Police proudly posted on X the other day that they've scanned 8 million faces in a certain number of months, and the error rate was 4 zeros and then a 3. Now, in a city of millions of people, that actually means that daily people are being accused of crimes because of a failure in the technology. We've seen that many of these algorithms, we've spoken about large language models having a bias towards the left. Some of the algorithms used in facial recognition technology have been proven racist. They're more likely to identify people of ethnic minorities as being criminals. And so we have this situation where we have a really, really useful technology, which for our architects, our educators, our medics, to an extent, if we remove the state aspect to it, it can be an absolute game changer. But there needs to be, I don't want to say the R word, regulation, but there needs to be some limits on state usage here, because if we combine this capability and this bandwidth with the fallibility, we're going to start seeing people locked up or given the wrong medical treatment as a result.
Not only that, Alex, the risk is that, to be honest, it's I was reading something then saying that our society is going towards a very rational thing. So all decisions must be backed by science and must be absolutely rational and stuff. And I was just thinking to myself, actually, the writer of the article said that no, we should be. Sometimes there are some things that are not rational. So the fact that a nation is comprised of a certain group of people that speak the same language, that have the same culture, that have shared the same morality, same religion, same thing, it's not rational. So it's not an optimal distribution of the workforce or whatever. So the point is that if you train a model on healthcare and stuff, it will come up with solutions that will be abhorrent from a moral point of view. Because, to be honest, and this is something that we actually have seen for the past 20, 30 years, and saying, if the amount of money that is needed to keep someone alive after a certain age is not reasonable, so the AI panel will decide that, sorry, grandma has to die, so long, and it's rational and stuff. So the whole point of morality, I seem to remember from your pamphlet, Sandy, it's very tricky, because it opens up a lot of questions that maybe we're not comfortable facing at the moment, because I seem to think that everybody's thinking in terms of productivity and stuff, and makes sense, because especially the UK, rest of Europe as well, productivity has been stagnant for 20 years, notwithstanding the internet and all the computer stuff. But in terms of morality, I think that we are way behind the technology. What is your take?
I think one very important moral principle, and it applies equally to sort of public and private realms and the public and private sector, is that humans need to own decisions and be accountable for decisions, whether that's a particular policy, or whether that's a piece of work that's been done to a certain standard. None of us would be very impressed if it was if somebody said, I ran over that person, but my brakes hallucinated, or if the car manufacturer said, that car exploded, but the engine hallucinated. And likewise, the problem of letting AI, of outsourcing decisions to AI, who is held accountable for what it has done? And as I mentioned before, I don't think the hallucination problem can ever be eliminated completely. It's not a matter of just sort of tweaking things until it's just right. I think there are actually some very foundational reasons why you will never quite get there on that front. Reasons that go back to the philosophical questions that Alan Turing and Alonzo Church were grappling with in the 1930s. They're equally profound. And let's say, for the sake of argument, one was happy with the police doing all of this surveillance and recognizing everyone's faces. And I know we're not happy with that. But even if we were, that little, that fraction, that daily fraction of people being misrecognized or misaccused, that's not acceptable collateral damage, even if you would accepted that approach. And I don't, and you don't. So people need to own decisions. They can't just say the AI made the decision.
Sorry,
I just auto-muted my microphone. Sorry, that's the good and bad.
I agree with that. And, there's been a debate on authorship, and the authorship is really somebody taking responsibility. However, the elements and aspects of the work he's presenting or representing and standing behind were generated. And that's been like, if you're leading an organization, you might have many people working within your organization, and in the end you stand up and presenting work which is attributed to you because you take responsibility for it. And similarly, I would say this is the death of the author was proclaimed many years ago. So, but authorship in this sense is a point of attribution, a point of taking responsibility, and that still happens when you use these aids. You don't outsource that element, you outsource the generation, but then obviously you will take that on and represent that and take responsibility. So I'm not so worried about that. And you're similarly positioned to, if you're in a large organization and you work, present results which have many aspects, many details, many things you cannot fully overview, and you still have to trust that and make a judgment call and stand there and present that, and similarly would be exposed or in a similar position with the AI. So it's not absolutely unique. And now many scientific research projects have this aspect that there might be many authors, and nobody can understand and represent the whole completely, and yet there is kind of aspects of trust, and there's similarly models you might trust, and then there will be and are, I think, also testing cycles and collaboration and experiences which allow us to use these models responsibly. And that's what I believe is not, as I was trying to suggest, there's not this huge chasm that suddenly we're kind of cut loose from and are no longer able to take responsibility. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so on terms of having spent my fair amount of years in management, up medium, higher management, I see that probably AI is going to be used as a scapegoat in terms of following the universal rule of middle management, which is CYA, cover your you-know-what, or as they call it in the MI6, London rules, and saying, I'm not responsible. AI told me so. It's its fault, not mine. But in terms of saying, the thing that I find very worrying from being a content producer, because nowadays everyone is a content producer, aside from this, which is content, even if we hate it because it's conversation, it's got an intellectual value to it that goes well beyond the content itself, is a problem of copyright. Because it's already happened that musicians so we have two sides of the problem. One side of the problem is that these AI models, they use existing music to train themselves. So if I go there, I ask a prompt and I say, well, I want to have kind of like a ballad mid-tempo in the style of the Smiths, because I was a massive Smiths fan in the 80s and so on. I don't know, Johnny Marr and Morrissey probably are not going to be super keen on the fact that the AI is generating stuff that can be very well mistaken as theirs. But then there is another bit saying that you have people that are using AI to generate that. I had this kind of problem. We need to have some kind of an intro music. And so the easiest way for me would be to go to an AI company and go there and say that I want a certain kind of music with some parameters, and it will produce that. And then you have a copyright strike because the AI company said, well, this is mine, so I'm going to earn anything that you're getting from this piece of music, which is a big problem. So anyway, right now we're having two issues, which is if I am a writer and I put out something and someone writes an article in the style of Luca Bocci, I don't earn anything from it, even if the model has used my articles as a way to train itself. So right now, I think copyright laws, they were having massive problems anyway, because it's an outdated model and it's very
I'm personally
fashion. Yeah.
I would keep that at bay. I don't think we can burden these models which ingest. I mean, the great image models like DALL-E or language models, burden them with copyright issues when they're ingesting and let's say intersecting and reusing a lot of input. That shouldn't be a copyright issue. I mean, one would have to look at the final outcome. If that's has an enormous amount of similarity with the prior outcome, then you can come in here and maybe say something. But just ingesting works and materials, I don't think should bring copyright onto the scene. I think that would be just a break on innovation and a break on proliferation of these capacities. So I'm highly skeptical of that, and similarly, I'm skeptical with respect to IP and patents and all of that. System does more damage and prohibits innovation, in my view, than facilitating inverted commas. But yeah, I hope this is not happening then.
Yeah, but it's, you see that the kind of problem is saying everybody hates the patent thing. So because obviously, I seem to remember something that I read couple of days ago and saying that there was a company that is a software company, video game company, that has just developed a model that is actually great, and it would make sure that the NPCs in a certain game learn from your actions. So if you are a coward, they will treat you as a coward. And if you are doing something and you're very sneaky, they will be very wary of what you do. And it's something that was massive. It was used in a couple of games back in 2016. Then Warner Brothers owned that and said, well, no, we're not using that anymore. But considering we have a patent on that, nobody can use that. And nobody can develop a kind of internal character arc-driven mode so that it could be used on other games. So they're pretty much sitting on innovation, and this has been damaging the whole video game industry, something that I was part of many years ago. So nobody likes patents, but at the same time, nobody likes his work to be completely stolen and reused and stuff without getting any money. So right now, I think that we are going to have a clash in terms of saying what is fair, what is not fair. Because copyright as well.
As a creative, I like to if I'm influencing, if I'm projecting, if I'm proliferating work and inspire work, I love that. I mean, direct copies, that's another question. But I don't think we have that. That's not the way language models, and that's the way AI works. That's not direct copying.
I think we need to think about the practicalities here of how on earth you would enforce copyright, at the scale with which large language models, are absorbing data, as was previously mentioned. It certainly does stifle innovation, intellectual property. There's an argument to be made that anything that is apprehendable from nature cannot be signed off to an individual. If someone invents a mousetrap, having never seen one before, for example, are they breaking copyright or patent law? So I think if we try to start regulating artificial intelligence, if we start getting the musicians were up in arms. And I do understand where these people come from. It feels like their property has been taken. But if you've put something in the public domain, if we say some human being is allowed to take inspiration from other human beings' work and produce something of their own, why do we not extend that same right to large language models who do so without intent?
Yeah, well, I think right now I seem to remember there was a story I heard a while ago and saying that the first time that Gary Newman wanted to go on top of the pops, and the musician union was having a hissy fit about it because they were saying, well, you're using synthesizers, you're not a proper musician, so you're putting us out of work. And they didn't want him to be there, and they were going on strike for that. And then at the same time, if you wanted to be on top of the pops, you needed to be a member of the musicians union, which is maddening, if I may think so. But I think that this is kind of the point that I'm saying there's always been problems like this. But I think that right now the danger is that something seems a bit off. I think maybe we're missing something. What do you think, Sandy?
It's a subtle thing because there's a history of intellectual property being defined and enforced and negotiated, and what constitutes simply copying and pasting something, and what constitutes using it in a sort of way that transforms it. That's been an ongoing debate, and the history of the recording industry and sampling and so on and so forth. New recording technologies have had this impact on various art forms, and it's had to be threshed out. I do have quite a lot of sympathy with Patrik's attitude, and I love the work that was done by William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen in the 1960s when they were pioneering their cut up and fold in methods as ways of rejuxtaposing elements from their respective art forms. All of that being said, I do think the musicians and the other artists are entitled to be rather pissed off at the moment because they didn't. The people behind AI didn't seek permission. They just did it in a sort, apology or negotiation after the fact. And a lot of trust has been broken in the way that the big large language models have been trained. You know, there are certain standards of what you do when you crawl a website and when you whether you scrape a website or not, that were broken. There was the Library Genesis archive of, you know, stolen books that was just used to train a lot of these models. And once you've trained them, you know, trying to undo that is like unbaking a cake. So I do have a lot of sympathy and regard as well for the aggrieved creators. And Luca, you mentioned copyright strikes, which is very interesting, you know, for example, in relation to YouTube. And I would just direct those who are interested in that to watch some recent videos by Rick Beato and Andy Edwards about their experience of copyright strikes, which has been frustrating because they've been trying to actually spread the word about music and interview great musicians and have them explain things. And they've been
that's what I was referring to. I was referring to Rick Beato specifically.
Copyright strikes. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So that's no good. That's not helping anyone either.
Yeah, I know, because the kind of problem that we're having right now is that obviously being interested in making content and stuff, music has been a big part of my life and stuff. So I would love to have the thing where I can discuss the impact that a certain piece of music had in my life and everything. I think there is a channel that I follow on YouTube that is great. It's called Trash Theory, where they're making this long form content on groups from the 80s and 90s and stuff. And I remember watching a video of that and saying that, well, that's a shame. He's talking about all this great music and he's only showing 5 seconds of stuff. Well, actually showing the video, but only 5 seconds of music, because otherwise there is a copyright strike launched at him, because I think Universal is particularly bad at this. It's go ahead and say they have people they pay to make copyright strikes on everyone. And then you have to have an attorney on on your side that is on call. Exactly. And every single time is just going there and saying, that's ridiculous. This is Title 10. This is fair use. Don't stop it and stuff.
And this is an asymmetry because the copyright holder can make a vexatious copyright claim without any penalty, whereas the person who's being charged with a copyright strike has to keep defending themselves over and over again. And as you say, Rick Beato has actually had to pay out of his pocket a lawyer to deal with all this. And it's ridiculous. It's not quite the same issue as AI. Well, ironically, I think the AI is being used actually by the copyright holders in this instance to send out the copyright claims. That's
another danger that nobody talks about. The fact of saying that right now, back in the day, if you wanted to have someone, you had to bump into it. You go on YouTube and you realize, hold on, they're using a piece of music that is in my library. I own the rights to it, so I will make a copyright strike. But then again, you have to balance it in terms of saying, that's a hassle. How many people do I have in the department that is looking after these kind of claims? I say, oh, well, I have enough people. They already overworked, so probably I'm not going to do that. But if I have an AI model that is scouring the internet day and night and is becoming more and more powerful, every kind of copyright claim will be immediate and it will be automatic, and it will be done with the kind of precision and relentlessness that is going to drive everyone out. And I think that there are many content creators right now that they're saying, okay, I will not talk about music anymore because every time I have a strike. And this obviously is unintended consequences and stuff.
You're right. It's not even precise, though, necessarily. Sometimes, yes, the technology is seeking out the piece of copyrighted work that has allegedly been used, but the precision with which these things are sent out is very sloppy because there's no disincentive, there's no penalty for a vexatious copyright claim on YouTube. In other contexts there are, but not on YouTube.
So the issue here is one more of law than AI, essentially, because AI, if I understand this correctly, we could say that it's able to find violations of copyright and is also increasing the number of violations. So in a sense, it's cancelling itself out, and we need to focus on law rather than the technology. Is that what you'd agree with, Sandy?
No, it's a combination of elements. Yes, there are relevant laws in different jurisdictions. There are also the policies of YouTube and the way it enacts them, and there is the degree of automation that is plausible without collateral damage. So there's a whole variety of things here, and there's a cultural side to it as well. There's the human stories we need to hear from the sorts of people we're discussing.
So yeah, I think that the whole point is that we are very aware that this could be. I don't think it's going to be. Possibly we could be underestimating the impact of this new technology, because, as you were saying, everybody's fixating on large language models, but there are many ways which these models can be used, not only in terms of creativity and stuff. So obviously, Patrik was saying, well, rather than having junior architects working on a kind of prospect and saying, well, I'll show it how it could be this option A, B, or C, and I will have AI model generating me a very detailed thing so I can show it to the client, that the client can see and say, well, I like this. Well, the lobby is with this way, with the light and everything, is going to be great. But if you give me one moment, I can change the marble instead of granite or wherever. It can be, not an architect. So I don't know exactly how it can be. But just in terms of saying, with the time that it would take a team of junior architect designers to just create one, I can have 20. And so more options means that it's just better. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, so what about the junior architect that is paying his dues and starting out on as a minor thing? Is making prompts to AI, or will he do something else? Because I know there's, in terms of creativity, it's always better, more options, more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Yeah, what about the lower level things? Because that's a risk.
I mean, you said it. More options is always better. We get better decisions if we had a larger search space to explore, probe, compare. And you can also, there's also analytic AI, let's say. So not only the generation, but then the next level of it. At the moment, we don't have that in the image production because it's relatively subjective. But with many other aspects of computer generated, you have also computer analytics, and you can loop them into an evolutionary algorithm. And then again, but then at the end of that, somebody is standing there and taking responsibility, taking charge, understanding the process, and trusting the analytics, and then making a judgment call and presenting it and say, hey, I'm the author. And that's totally legitimate. So.
Okay, I got it. So in terms of so we were talking about, I think, reading your pamphlet, Sandy, you were worried about the kind of like saying the way that transhumanism, which is a tendency that we've seen grown in the last few decades and stuff, is now intersecting with this kind of techno enthusiasm and stuff, and saying everybody's looking at Neuralink and saying, well, that would be great because if someone is blind, someone is tetraplegic, it cannot move. So if I'm integrating the stuff and putting a computer interface with an AI model, maybe he can walk, he can become super productive and stuff. And then you will have the nightmares of the science fiction writers and of the old days and saying, hold on a second, okay, we are entering the age of the cyborg, and we know exactly how we can go wrong and how we will go wrong. So again, I'm having the feeling that we're missing a few of the pages and stuff. So in terms of moral questions and stuff, so what is your take?
I don't use the term transhumanism in the pamphlet. That term can be used in many different ways, and I don't necessarily have a quarrel with all of them. When the phrase artificial intelligence was, in its 20th century sense, was coined, it was in the mid-1950s, it was to distinguish a certain approach to making human-like machines from cybernetics, from the area that originally gave us the idea of the cyborg. The idea of artificial intelligence was originally an attempt to sort of do something a little bit different from that. What's interesting about bringing it back to the human body, I think embodiment is a really important part of what makes us human, and is a key difference between us and present day AI. The fact that we are finite in space and in time. Not that I want to make a virtue of our sort of mortality. If we can extend our life, fantastic. But the fact that we are sort of bodily circumscribed, each of us, and yet we can share our ideas can circulate among us as freely as they are in the conversation we're having right now. It's that combination of embodiment and the circulation of ideas among a collective that, obviously there are different philosophies, but from my point of view, that's a really key ingredient of what makes us human. It's so interesting that the image generating AI, the diffusion models, a couple of years ago, you know, people would laugh because they would constantly, these models would constantly put the wrong numbers of fingers on human hands if they were trying to generate photorealistic images, and also put the wrong number and concentration of teeth in people's mouths. But if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you or I were gaseous beings from Jupiter and we were trying to understand what the human body was just by studying millions and millions of two-dimensional photos, we wouldn't know whose fingers belong to whom. We wouldn't know how many teeth they're meant to be in a mouth. The reason you and I know this is because we own, you know, we're in possession of our bodies and we occupy three-dimensional space, and AI doesn't have that. Is that a problem? Is that a limitation? Well, obviously they're now tweaking the diffusion models and they've managed to eliminate a lot of those problems. So the photorealism is less jarring. But actually, I kind of miss the wonky AI from a couple of years ago. I think of it a little bit like, you know, you get lens flare with a camera, you get feedback from a guitar amplifier. These are things the eyes in our head and, you know, and the insides of our ears don't do, but our technology does it, and we found ways to make that a feature, not a bug. We found ways to use it creatively. So I think the ways that on the one hand, I think AI falls short of us in many ways. There's things we can do that it can't and may never do, and vice versa, in fairness. But we should celebrate that. We should find creative opportunities from that. I'm quite enthusiastic about it. I think perhaps Patrik might be as well.
Well, I'm certainly very open-minded when it comes to augmenting our mental capacities, our also bodily capacities, this kind of cyborgism. It doesn't have to be through implants, but I would even not worry about that too much. So I don't think there's a very fixed sense of human nature pre-given, like something God-given. Of course there is, we're not a blank slate, and there is something you could call human nature, but I kind of tend to agree with this kind of anti-humanism of the post-structuralists when it came through in the 70s, that they were kind of suggesting this kind of emphasizing the malleability, the plasticity, and historical open-endedness, also through somebody like Nietzsche, etc. So that's the spirit I also have. I love the human project. It's very open-ended. It could happen, and it should happen as fast as possible. I want to witness as much as possible. That's why somebody who's a bit more of a risk taker when it comes to innovation, permissionless innovation, and of course not being reckless with the virus research, etc., like that. But on a sense, if it doesn't hurt others initially, and let's explore it. And I find people who explore their own, you know, body extension, etc. And there's been artists like Starr who've been expressing that sensibility. That's also my sensibility. I'm kind of future, a lot of desire and curiosity about the future. Let it come on, let it bring on. I have this kind of accelerationist sensibilities also. So they exist also on the left. And AI is, of course, a major part of that. So bring it on, please, as fast as possible. We're on for a few more years, and I want to see the human project take off to unknown destinations. So I don't believe it will be Mars. It will be on planet Earth.
Why not? Why not? For the love of God, that's what I want to see. You know, this is kind of the thing about human creativity and stuff. So everybody. I was big into astronautics and stuff. So one of the first books that I had was the history of stuff. I was born in 1972 when the Apollo program was shutting down. So I kind of always felt like I missed something from that. So that's why I was big into space. And if somebody had come to me 30 years ago and saying, well, in 30 years, you're going to have a company that is reusing the first stage of a rocket, regularly, so much that it becomes so commonplace that it's not news anymore, I would have laughed in your face. And being quite knowledgeable about the industry, I would say, no, that's ridiculous. It will never happen. And then Elon made it happen. Why? Because he used a method that it was going against the grain of all traditional knowledge, and saying, well, that's not the proper way to do things. And he was saying, yeah, I'll blow things up. Then those things don't blow up anymore, and I've made progress. But then again, in the field of art, of the arts especially, I think limitations are what makes creativity. So if you look at the films of the very early age, from the Lumiere brothers on, they were extremely limited in terms of visual range of stuff. So that's why you had to have fixed camera, because you didn't have the dollies and stuff. You couldn't move the shot a lot because, putting on focus was really difficult and stuff. But they used it to create. And then the film was very harsh. That's why you had this big contrast. And they were using chalk makeup, so that you have this very expressive eyes and makeup. So I think limitation is that right now we're actually risking the big bang in terms of content, because nowadays I think that there are already films that have been produced completely using AI, or just to reduce the massive budget in terms of CGI. But again, this is a massive risk, because nowadays you say, well, you are the create me a movie in the style of Quentin Tarantino that is talking about this, and that. And then a week later, there you go, final product. Okay, you don't need to use actors anymore. And the Actors Guild, and I think that was one of the main issues that the Writers Guild was before the strike, the latest strike, I think that was in 2023, if I remember correctly, was just the usage of AI. And in terms of residuals, they were not having any residual from AI and stuff. So I'm worried, maybe because I'm not as young in terms of mentality and stuff. But I think that probably having complete control is going to have massive detriment on the terms of quality, and even the terms of arts and creativity and stuff.
Let the
is it
market
just
decide.
me?
Let the market decide where the quality lies, and price quality, relations. And so I have no problems. I mean, that might be your worry, and it might turn out that it's very popular or not.
Yeah. But you think that people should know if something is AI generated? Because I think that there is a lot of discussion on that now as well.
I wouldn't impose it kind of as a necessity to be transparent, but I guess companies might want to be transparent, because if they pretend and it turns out that they weren't. So I do probably good policy. You don't need to legislate. Anyway, that's my key always. Probably there will be transparency. You would know. And
well, I don't know. Again,
you would know. That's an interesting point. I mean,
let's say the companies would let you know as a consumer, probably.
Yeah. You would know. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because if we are already behaving machine-like, or if our lives and our, jobs put us in situations where we have to behave like machines, then maybe we won't know. And it would be rather nice if you're talking to somebody on the phone for a reason to know whether you're talking to an AI or not. You wouldn't necessarily know if you weren't told, not because there's anything wrong with that person, but because they're being forced into a fairly, dehumanizing and rote role. With the use of AI to, well, as I already mentioned, I think the web is unfortunately dominated by AI slop, because it's ridiculously cheap to produce. So that's not the market winning. That's just having to wade through a lot of rubbish that is, wasting space and taking up, and getting in the way. There's a flood. There's a really interesting video was made recently by the YouTube philosopher Jared Henderson called AI Writing is Taking Over. He pointed out that when someone publishes a book now, you instantly get clones of the book on Amazon in the hope of deceiving somebody into buying that book because they think it's the one you want to buy. So there's this really cheap to produce rubbish and slop that's just swamping absolutely everything, and it's not doing us any good. So that's a problem. If we get to a situation, however, where we can make photorealistic, moving images, and there's not any way to verify what their provenance is, and you already have the difficulties with deep fakes, political attack ads, and so on and so forth. If that process continues, we might ultimately find ourselves in a very interesting place where we've lost all idea of what a recording even is, and whether we've captured real life or not, or what it means for something to be authentic. Next year is the 200th anniversary of the first photograph. So that will be an interesting place to get to if we get there. But the way that the route there, the time we take to arrive there, will I think be very painful, at least in terms of images. Moving
on the copyright thing, on the this issue with the slop on the internet.
Yeah,
I believe the market has a solution. I actually asked ChatGPT on this topic, at 2 o'clock in the morning a few weeks ago, as you do, getting into these deep discussions with the LLMs, what the potential impact of advances in AI would be on human-generated content, the arts, the music. And I was shocked with the response it came back with, but very pleased. It suggested that the market will therefore confer significantly increased value on human-produced content, be it handmade wares, pottery, paintings, so on and so forth. The issue, as you've touched on, is obviously how can we verify whether these things are genuinely human-made? But I don't think we need to worry about the slop. The slop has been dumped on the market, and we haven't quite got to the point yet where the market has been able to respond. But I think we will naturally get to that point, and we'll see an increase in value for human-generated content. On the second point, I think is a lot more concerning that you made regarding footage. What will we know is real or not? There's serious concerns. I had an elderly relative send me a AI generated video of a super volcanic eruption on a mythical island that she said, "Have you seen this on the news?" I said, "No, I haven't, because that's AI generated." That is a much more serious concern, and I think that weighs heavily on the importance of in-person interactions. For convenience, we're meeting online, we're all in different locations. But what we need to make sure we do in the AI is continue to interact physically and in person as human beings, so that we can maintain a sense of reality.
Yeah, I think that the risk that we are having, on top of these very weird videos, I think I've seen an AI video that was the story of a heroic dog and something. It was doing the rounds a while ago, and it was exceedingly well made. And it was kind of like a sub story and stuff, but it was final heroic and stuff. And it was quite long. It was 4 or 5 minutes, if I remember correctly. It was very good. But the problem is that now I'm thinking about my mother. My mom is turned 80 years old. And sometimes she shows me the phone and stuff and say, "Well, they're saying that the cloud storage is going out. What should I do? What should I do?" And I go and say, "Mom, we don't have a cloud storage with that company, so you might as well disregard the email. They're just sending emails and stuff." But what about if a phone call comes with someone that is faking my mobile number and is using my voice and saying, Mom, I'm stranded in, I don't know, maybe I'm abroad. I need help. Send me money. This is the stuff, because otherwise I'm not able to come home." This has happened already.
Yeah, I think crime is a huge thing, and AI will be kind of fueling crime as well. I mean, it's the same with the whole of internet crime and internet fraud and hacking and all the rest of it. Yeah, crime is unfortunately, and it could be conducted from anywhere on the planet. It is so that, but look, authorities won't help us. Governments won't help with that crime issue. So that has to be within the ecosystem with products and services which protect us and filter things. So there's going to be some kind of arms race between the criminals and the systems. I mean, here we are, and the solutions are private solutions. PayPal, for instance, overcame the kind of internet fraud potential, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we have to rely on. It's a shame that there's going to be quite a bit of investment going into anti-crime and anti-fraud, and so. But I think we can manage.
Hopefully.
Been kind of without much. I haven't been a victim in years and years and years and years. So.
Yeah. I come from the being a journalist that was trained back in the 1990s. The first thing that I managed to learn was what my old editor used to tell me and say, "What is this? Why is this bastard lying to me?" Because that was the thing they were saying. Every time you were facing someone with an interview, in the back of your head, you should have thought, he's lying to me. I'm going to find him out. I'm going to discover why he's lying and what he's lying about.
No, you will have filters in your phone to kind of, so now also we have a very high. We had been some victims of hacking in the company and ransom hackings and so on, and we have now these extra layers, and sometimes you need to click one more time, saying yes, no harm, safe.
Okay.
So, but on the other hand, what shouldn't, but of course governments have to stay out of this. That recently there was this kind of law where the European Union wants to scan every single private message on WhatsApp and to keep us all safe or keep children safe. So that to be careful. It needs to be.
Yeah.
We need to tailor that to our needs. We need to purchase these tools and anti-crime measures within the private market.
Well,
it's actually
the Online Safety Act is doing exactly what the EU proposed, but the German Constitutional Court rejected it. But no problem with our socialists here imposing that upon us, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's the point, because everybody seems to forget what was written in the bottom of every communication by the government in Germany in a particular period were 3 words that were always used. And my German is awful, even if I lived in Germany for many years, but it was für Ihre Sicherheit, and actually saying for your safety. So all the things that were done to take away your freedom were always to keep you safe and to keep your stuff. So we're going towards 1.5 hours, and I wanted to just, we've been very kind and participate in stuff, but everybody has got their own lives and stuff. I haven't had dinner, by the way, but that's so.
Thanks to you, Luca. Thanks to Alex, and thanks to Sandy.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just wanted to have a final round of thing and say.
I have to kind of.
It's going to be very quick. Okay. Just a very fast thing, and saying, what is the one thing, I'm going to steal it from the guys of trigonometry. What is the one thing that we're not talking about that we should be talking about more? So I'll start with you, Patrik.
Well, I mean, what we actually talked about in the Battle of Ideas mostly is something we didn't touch at this point, and maybe what is a little arcane. It was about kind of true insight, true knowledge, maybe even consciousness, and I think that's another episode. But maybe we had our answers. Yeah. We think we don't overestimate our own kind of sense of insight. We're just a supercomputer in our own right.
Yeah, I know. That would be very interesting.
That's what we didn't touch, and it was 90% of the Battle of Ideas conversation we had.
Oh boy, that sounds a bit very interesting.
And that's online, I guess, soon as well, or already. Yeah.
A bit arcane. So, Sandy.
Well, look, thank you ever so much for having me on your program, and thanks, Patrik. Actually, this is the 3rd time we've discussed AI together, and it's always very rewarding. I'm going to mention the same thing that I'm going to be greedy actually and mention 2 things. The first is the risk of AI. What happens when it consumes its own content? We discussed that at the Battle of Ideas a bit. This is what's called autophagy, consuming output as input, or model autophagy disorder, MAD. It's an analogy with mad cow disease. That can make AI do all sorts of wacky things. And the amount of slop that's on the web makes it more of a risk, because the AI is now training on AI-dominated content, which it wasn't 2 years ago when generative AI really took off. So I'd say autophagy is a problem. But the final thing I'll say is exactly what Patrik was just alluding to, was this question of insight and the history actually behind AI, the long journey we're on. So for at least 2,300 years, it's been an interesting question in mathematics, beginning with Euclid's element. And then for the past 100 years of computer science, beginning with Turing and Church that I mentioned before, and then moving on to what's called the P versus NP problem from Stephen Cook, the greatest unsolved problem in computer science. These are all questions that ask, what is the relationship between humans and automated or automatable process? Which bit is uniquely human? Which bit can we take shortcuts? And that's the constant question, the constant friction. And what the current questions we're asking about generative AI are just the latest expression of that. So I think it can be very rewarding to look at the history and then look at where we are now and then imagine where that question might take us in the future. So that's what I would recommend looking at, the foundational questions of mathematics, computer science, and indeed AI.
Okay, so Alex, just a final word of closure and stuff. This was the first episode. I think it was exceedingly interesting and stuff. And I thank all our guests for coming here and for educating us on this very important topic. So again, I'll ask the question to you as well, even if this is your channel and stuff. So.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to Sandy and Patrik. At the Libertarian Party, we like to think that we listen, that our policy is reflective of expert opinion, and we're certainly taking on board a lot of what's been said this evening. One thing we haven't discussed, I'm going to finish with the science fiction scary stuff. I've been reading Nick Bostrom's Super Intelligence, if anyone's had a go at that. And just one thing I would consider is, if there is any threat at all of an artificial general or super intelligence, the most important thing we do is align it with values of individual liberty rather than any collectivist ideals.
Okay, that's lovely.
I love that one. That's great.
Okay, lovely. I thank you to every one of you, but most importantly, I will just keep the occasion to just thank everyone that's been with us. And it's a new show. Obviously, we need as much help as we can get to spread the word. So if you know anyone that could be interested in this kind of thing, I will strongly urge you to please take the link and forward it to them, because nowadays there is so much disinformation and stuff that this kind of discussion that is honest, a bit anarchic and stuff, because obviously we didn't have a plan, we didn't have anything written in advance. I think this can be very helpful. So I thank you all for your attention and for your help. And that was the first episode of this show. So right now our aim is to have it as frequently as possible, but obviously we will let you know if we have. Not all the episodes are going to be like this. So all other episodes will be just conversations about very specific topics. So we will not fly high as we float today, but maybe talk about very practical subjects and stuff. So I will give you the occasion, and so we will meet again on this channel. Thank you all for